making sure that we're staying in compliance with. And I think as a government we need to do that. Second thing, I actually absolutely agree with you that there's far too many things that take place in secrecy. Peter asked me if every member of Congress should have access to all the information everybody else has. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think this. I think that sometimes we classify far too much data, and sometimes we classify it so that it can't be distributed. I think we have to be very, very careful about doing that. And the second thing that I think we need to be very careful about is all the things that happen behind closed doors. It's not just whether you get classified information, but I don't even like the fact that sometimes we're having more and more of these gang of 5, gang of 8, gang of 6, getting behind closed room for years and creating bills that they just bring out and throw to the American people and say, here, this is the bill that you're going to have. I think it's important that we have that transparency and that's open, and that's why I appreciate the fact you got groups like C-SPAN that Peter mentioned going to cover I think 3 of these hearings as they come in and the debate on the Armed Services Bill. I'm glad that people tune into that and listen and pay attention.
Mike Freeman tweets into you, Congressman Forbes has followed Representative Himes in presenting a cooperative attitude. Why can't that carry over to solving our jobs problem?
Well, first of all, Mike, I think that it does in more aspects than you think. Oftentimes what you see in the press is kind of the extreme, and you see the people that are fighting with each other. You don't see the kind of working relations that I see every day that are taking place in Congress, and they're on a host of fronts. I've worked very, very closely with a member of Congress who's a Democrat on health care issues. I've worked very, very closely with my ranking member for the Sea Power subcommittee, as not just a colleague of mine, but he's a dear friend of mine. He's a Democrat, Mike McIntyre from North Carolina. We have an incredibly close relationship. I think that you see those relationships when you're in Congress working. Unfortunately, I don't think they get out in the press and get disclosed as much as I wish they could. And obviously, I wish that they would expand more and more in Congress than what they have.
John tweets in, how comfortable are you with the wide latitude given the U.S. Special Operations Command?
I'm not, comfortable is not a good word. You asked that question, Jim, I think, are you comfortable with these things? And I don't think we're ever totally comfortable with them, and I don't think we should be. And that's why I think we continue to do that oversight and monitor, because I realize that what I may be comfortable with today, Peter, I may be very, very uncomfortable with tomorrow if we're not constantly holding people accountable to what they're doing.
Representative Randy Forbes, a Republican of Virginia, is our guest. Paul is an independent in Holland, Massachusetts. Hi, Paul.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Paul.
If I'm correct, there is no such thing as an American merchant marine. Yet all the ships, foreign flag ships, bringing goods to the United States enjoy the protection of the United States Navy. Why can't you put an import tax on these ships to offset the cost of the United States Navy service and then apply these monies directly to our national debt? Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Paul. But we do have a merchant marine, and they do great jobs, as you know, throughout the history of our country. And the Navy now is working on a very integrated basis. It's not just Navy ships, but it's commercial ships that we use to do a lot of the hauling that needs to take place, the logistics work that has to take place. But I think what we need to do in terms of looking at the strength of our Navy is making a commitment about where we need to do and go as a country in terms of changing the curve lines. What really concerns me most is not what we tax other ships, but what we do in terms of commitment to our own naval vessels. And we're reducing the number of ships that we have dramatically. I think that's not a good curve line for us, and we're trying to change those lines.
Representative Forbes, has sequester hit your district at all? Has it affected
Sequester's hit everybody across the country. I voted against sequester, fought against it for over a year. But, Peter, remember, it's not just sequester. It's also the massive cuts the administration took before sequester. They cut about $587 billion, according to their records. According to the Armed Services Committee staff, it was more like $778 billion. But the problem, Peter, was not that you made the cuts, but you made the cuts without any analysis. And what we believe very strongly in is you need to go in and do the analysis first and say, what do we need to defend and protect the country? The budget shouldn't be driving the strategy ought to be driving the budget, and we haven't seen that. Sequestration has had a huge impact on our national defense.
What about in your district down
My
in
district
Eastern Virginia,
obviously is
Southeast?
impacted. When you look at my district and you look at Virginia as a whole, obviously it's had a huge impact because we've been able to stave off a large portion of that impact short term, but over a long term it's going to take a huge toll.
As a Republican, were you one of few to fight against sequestration?
I think this year, the only Republican, probably the only Republican or Democrat who voted against all these budgets because I didn't think they had the dollars we needed to do for national defense. I was one of a few who voted against sequestration, so that the time where we would be. I then launched a tour around the country to try to raise awareness because, as you remember, Peter, you guys in the press were having to go back to the thesaurus and say, what is sequestration? You know, the public didn't even know. And we were trying to raise awareness, but also say, if we don't get this thing changed, it's going to have huge impact for national defense. And unfortunately, we failed in that.
Davis in Case, South Carolina, Republican line. Last call for Representative Forbes.
Thank you. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great.
You were mentioning a lack of transparency earlier, and that's my concern about this FISA court. We're being told that that's our line of defense against the NSA overreaching, and yet we don't know how many people are on the court, who are they, who appoints them, how long is their term of service. I mean, I think they should be changed out pretty regularly so people don't get too comfortable in that position. I wonder if you could explain whatever you can about this court and how it works.
Let me tell you this. I think, first of all, you raise an excellent question. As I go back today to the Judiciary Committee, one of the things we're going to try to do is make sure that we get more transparency on how that court operates and who it operates, and because I think they're fair questions, and I think all that's information that ought to be disclosed, and the American public ought to be able to get access to that and be able to have it. These courts, if they operate, even if they're doing a good job and a fair job and they're applying the constitutional principles that we want to, if the American people don't have transparency there, that they're not going to have trust and confidence in that. So I think your point's well taken, and we got to make sure that we're disclosing that information in a more transparent way. And
on Sunday on the Washington Journal, 9:15 a.m., we will be doing a segment on the FISA courts, so you can watch the Journal on Sunday at 9:15 a.m. to learn more about the FISA court system. Matthew tweets in, none of our USA political leaders has said stop to the NSA. Don't record, don't keep this anymore. None. I think that they have said we want to control this, we want to balance it, but I think, Peter, most of the people who've watched these programs and seen these programs know also the tremendous risk the United States is exposed to, and they want to make sure that we're at least defending against that. And we have been talking for the last 45 minutes with Representative Randy Forbes, Republican of Virginia. We appreciate your time this morning, Congressman. One more segment.